we back again, moving forward. Too many call Peace and War Times. I'm your host, talking on the Nupu. I'm a proud member of the Ethiopian Kinkaid race, and I represent the ladder, also known as Capricorn sign in the zodiac. And part of my job is to help remove the waste. And that's my quick introduction. We got a lot to cover tonight.
All right. True peace, all Kansas and friends. Ununupu. Also a proud member of the Ethiopian race, also known as the Black race. I represent bone marrow, which happens to be the Aries zodiac sign within the Ethiopian race. Also, I'm a proud representative of Noon, given to us by our great and noble messenger Afro Nunupu. Tonight is going to be another explosive episode given to us by our great and noble kin. So I'm just going to be sitting back, relaxing. Today, I'm not going to drop nothing, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a very intense and thorough presentation. So thank you for putting this together, noble kin. True peace.
True peace, kins and friends. I'm a Nunabu helper, Nibu Re Unu Nupu. I'm a proud member of the Ethiopian race, and I also represent the battle to get all this waste pushed out, and the veil to be spell. And I'm just gonna and enjoy this beautiful information that's about to come out, and also a proud representative of the teachings that were given to us by Afro. True peace, kins and friends.
All right, I just step off real quick. All right, I'm back. All right, so we're going to listen to a video. It's going to be like 18 minutes, but it's worth it. It's by Professor James, which I was telling you. He's pretty informed for the most part. And then I'm going to go into everything after that. This just to kind of like get everybody caught up who may be a little knowledgeable about
Your voice, I don't know, it might be minute. Can you hear him clear?
Yeah, I can hear him clearly. Maybe it's on your
probably on your end, that's all.
Huh?
All right, so like I said, the professor is pretty thorough. I showed y'all what his YouTube looked like last night. I came upon him because him and Sneeko been doing a lot of interviews, and plus he's a professor and he do a lot of, so I follow him as well. I just wanted to use his video so he can kind of, like I said, bridge a couple of gaps, because he's discussing about 3-4 different religions and how they all are converging according to his research, and we're gonna fill in the blanks. All right. After that, if you've seen the thumbnail, Noon through Afro Unu, and Nupu through Afro Unu corrected the so-called sons of Noah, and they falsely have been calling the Ethiopian African Ham, which is a ham lie, a damn lie, a damn ham lie. We ain't got nothing to do with that. So that's why that thumbnail is putting the right races in perspective. All right, so that's another situation we have to deal with. So anyway, without further ado, let's get on to the video at hand so we can see what's going on. Let me know when y'all can see that.
Yeah, it's the YouTube screen, right?
Yeah. He dropped this 4 days ago, 187,000 views. All right, so let's listen to the professor and break this all down. It's gonna be very good. Get your notebooks and pen and paper, whatever, and do your due diligence. And yeah, this is also dealing with Revelation 16:16, which is running futuristically concurrent with what we did last night with the 2 witnesses and Iran and then eventually Turkey and all this other stuff like this. So this is going to follow next. The book Revelation is kind of like not in sequence, and you'll understand why. But we're just going to want to keep things in order.
So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the idea of eschatological convergence. Because once we know the different eschatologies, and we know how they converge together, we can actually make certain predictions about how this war will progress. Okay, so the first major eschatology I want to look at is called Zoroastrianism. And this is the first eschatology, and it's an eschatology of the Persian Empire, okay? And this is...
All right, so Persia is modern day Iran. And the language and the religion they used to deal with is Zoroastrianism. All right? This is where Rome bought a lot of their early sun-worshiping ideas from as well.
Eschatology is very simple. In the world, there's truth and the lie, okay? The light and the darkness. And it is our responsibility as humans to live for the light, to die for the truth against the lie. And at the end of days, there will be a final battle and a day of judgment, okay? So light versus dark, and then you have a day of judgment, okay? Where the God, Ahura Mazda, will come down and he will create a paradise for everyone, okay? So what matters is to live a noble life and await the day of judgment where eventually heaven on earth will manifest, okay? And this is important because if you think about how the Iranians are fighting this war, the Iranians refuse to take the initiative and destroy too much, okay? They refuse to be the villains in this war because for them, in their eschatology, it's important to die for the light, to fight for the truth, okay? Now, Zoroastrianism has a major impact on Jewish eschatology, okay? And Jewish eschatology, again, I'm only talking about the most extreme version of this eschatology, okay? And in this eschatology, the idea is that the Jews disobeyed God, okay? Disobedience. And in order to repair the world, to save themselves, to create heaven on earth, they need to engage in redemption, okay? Redemption. And redemption is really about spiritual alchemy, improving yourself as a person, being good to yourself, being good to others, loving your neighbor as though you would love yourself. Okay?
All right, so this part of it is what he has wrong in the sense that the Zionist Jews are not the same as the Jews that's practicing Judaism. The ones that's engineering all of this, those don't believe in practicing positivity. They believe in practicing deception by any means necessary to bring in what they call the Messiah, all right, which we know is Osiris, who's lying to them via the philosophy, all right? So they believe in doing everything they can to achieve their goals. So that's one small piece that he's missing because he doesn't identify that. They believe that when we went through the story of the tree of life and the Kabbalah, they believe that the tree of life or the Eon Soph breathed out its goodness into Kelly pots and those balls or spears on the tree of life shattered and fell to the lower world, which is forms of Leviathan. And the only way they can get it back, which they believe, system believe, that the spears or orbs that broke the Kelly pots turned into people, other people, and that those people were filthy and could not and should not contain the sparks of the powers of the spears. So they feel that they doing whatever they got to do to basically put Leviathan back together, kind of like the Humpty Dumpty story in a different sense. All right, so he's not describing the Zionists and certain sect of Jews. They are not into loving people and your neighbor as yourself. That's not the same group he's identifying here.
That's a mainstream idea. But in the most extreme version, redemption just means acting out God's plan to compel the return of Messiah, okay? And this plan is basically create Israel, return Jewish diaspora, build third temple, and this will launch something called the War of Gog and Magog.
Now he's talking about the extreme Jews now, because what he just said when I unpaused it is that's the mainstream. And when he say mainstream, he's talking about Orthodox Jews, okay, or regular Jews who doesn't subscribe to the more stricter groups of Hasidic Jews and the Lubavitch group and the Chabad and those different groups that Benjamin Netanyahu and them and the elites subscribe to. Now he's talking about the extremists, the ones who want to reunite Israel, build a third temple, and make the Messiah come back. And now we're talking about the Gog and Magog war.
And then when the Jews are most threatened, the Messiah will come to save them from their enemies. And this will create something called the Messianic age, okay? When God rules over the earth through his Messiah, who comes from the house of David. So again, this is a simple version. There are lots of different versions. This is the most simple version for our purposes, okay? Now, what's interesting is that this Jewish eschatology would go on to influence the Protestants, okay? And this creates a movement called Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism, so the technical word for Christian Zionism is called premillennial dispensationalism, okay? And
let me add in, and the Protestants, which Newt had spoken about many years ago, is what capitalism came out of. In the Noon Science, we identify capitalism as Antichrist. All right, so the Protestants is being affected by the strict Jews, the ones that's trying to create this Jewel order type stuff. This is why in America, the evangelicals and the Protestants or the Christian Zionists from both sects all are being programmed to try to help the Jewish extremist group, Zionists, create this problem that we're seeing playing out with Iran and previous wars, even World War I and World War II.
And this sounds very complicated, but it's not. All it means is that God has a plan for how to create heaven on earth. And we have a duty to fulfill his plan by following his instructions. So what Christian Zionism is doing is that it takes this Jewish eschatology and makes certain changes to it, okay? So for example, the first change that it makes is, okay, this plan is fine, but rather than say that the Jewish Messiah is the representative of God, what they say is that no, he's actually the representative of Satan, okay? So the Messiah in the Jewish tradition becomes the Antichrist in the Christian Zionist tradition. And why is this important? It's important because for the Christians, the Messiah must be Jesus, okay?
Right, so this is one of the main differences, and this is what a spell compensates for Christians who don't understand that the extreme Zionists, their idea of a Messiah is not who the Christians saying that they Messiah. The Christians saying the Messiah already came once. The Jews said the Messiah never came. They killed the so-called Christian Messiah. And the Christians say that Messiah that they think is coming back is not their Jesus, but the Antichrist, and that their Jesus is coming back to rule the world and to put the church in place of the 12 tribes of Israel and all this old crap that they got going on. But you can see that the Jews is still philosophy-wise controlling the Christian Zionists, even though they think that the Antichrist is the Messiah the Jews is waiting on. The Christian Zionists is still compelled to help the extreme Jews, even though they say that they Messiah that the Jews waiting on is the Antichrist. So y'all can see the spell and the fact they're calling themselves Christian Zionists, and the Zionists are the ones that brag that they don't even say Jesus Christ. They hate Jesus so much they say JC. They always speak with the initial. These Christians are following and helping the same group of people that brag about killing their Savior.
So the Messiah, so the Antichrist, what he does is that he rules over the world. He's very charismatic, and he rules the world in Jerusalem. And he starts the war of Gog and Magog in order to conquer the world and destroy the Jews. At this point, Jesus will return to save God's chosen people, the Jews. And when Jesus returns, there'll be something called the rapture, where all Christians will immediately ascend to heaven. Okay? So the rapture. All right. Okay? So again, Christian Zionism is working off Jewish eschatology, but it's making some important changes. Okay? So another way of saying this is, in the beginning, Zionists and Christian Zionists will work together to reach a certain point of history, okay, what we call the Great Racial Project, but then they will diverge and fight against each other, okay? So they're allies now, but eventually they'll turn against each other.
Right, because the spell is gonna wear off, but they're using the spell on Christians to help them through America to sit here and do all of that they're doing. Sending billions of dollars, pumping Israel, pumping them up, giving them technology, helping them destroy other things. They under the spell, but eventually they get closer because they understand, at least in the book of Daniel, that Daniel doesn't call the rebuilding of the third temple positive. Daniel, and the way it's interpreted, is that when you see the abomination of desolation set up, which is them building the third temple. That's how they interpret it. So a lot of these Christians is gonna finally come to their senses around the time the temple is being set up for function. What's gonna happen? They're under the spell. They can't wake up from them genocide and all those Palestinians, which are Arabs, which is Esau, right? They still under the spell of that. But once they get to the point of Iran and how many other people they're going to murder before they take out the Muslim Al-Aqsa Mosque over there, by that time, once they set up the so-called third temple or whatever, that's when the Christian Zionists and Christians in general all going to realize that the Jew done tricked them again, just like they tricked the Romans into knocking off Caesarion Ptolemy, which they call Jesus Christ. That's when they're going to turn and start fighting them. That's when it's going to get into a bigger crowd of a war. All right? Right now, the Christian Zionists is still going hard. They thinking it's a good thing. The rest of the Christians in America is waking up.
All right, so now I want to talk about the Freemasons. Because the Freemasons, we'll talk more about the Freemasons later, okay? The Freemasons are also working within the Christian Zionist context. But they are much more focused on actually how to implement this, okay? So what they want to do is they want to take the Antichrist and turn it into a system. And this system we discussed last semester, it's called Pax Judaica. What is Pax Judaica? Pax Judaica is that Israel controls the world through AI, okay, an AI surveillance state, okay? Or their exact words is Holy Empire. And Pax Judaica, the AI surveillance state, will have things such as the mark of the beast. And what is the mark of the beast? It is digital ID. Okay, and this digital ID will also lead to digital currency. And they can actually put a microchip or a QR bar in your forehead, and this will be considered the mark of the beast, okay? And this is all part of the Christian Zionist eschatology. Another really important thing about the Freemasons is the idea of a one world government. Because remember, the Antichrist is the leader of a one world government. And it'll be based in Jerusalem, okay? And so the headquarters will be Solomon's Temple, or the Third Temple. So these are the, and then you have the Islamic eschatology, okay? In the Islamic eschatology is a response to all these other eschatologies, where they say that when the system is created, it'll be called Dajjal, the Antichrist, okay? And when this happens, then Jesus will return to defeat the Antichrist. That's the mainstream Islamic eschatology. Then you have the Shia, okay? The Shia, are the Iranians, where they believe that it will be the 12th Imam Mahdi who will lead the followers, okay? The Ummah, okay? Ummah just means community of believers, to believers, into victory against the Antichrist, the Dajjal, okay? So you can see how these eschatologies are basically lining up together, right? The Shia are the Iranians. The Islamic is the entire Arab world, right? Now, there are two more eschatologies I want to look at. And again, I know this is a lot. I know this is too much information, and we'll go over these eschatologies specifically as we move along, okay? But I just want to introduce the different eschatologies. Another eschatology that's very important is the Catholic eschatology. And the Catholic eschatology, we can call City of God, okay, which is the church, which is Jerusalem. And St. Augustine talks about this, about how the Catholic Church, it is the millennium, it is the Messianic age, because we represent God and we bring peace and prosperity to the world. Now, what's important about the church is that it became the dominant power in the world because Rome fell, okay? So Roman Empire collapses, but this is all part of God's divine plan, because Roman Empire, Rome, was the city of earth, okay, of power, of money, of wealth. And what matters is Jerusalem, the city of God, of spirituality, of divinity, okay? Now, the city of God came to an end because of the rise of the Protestants and the Anglo-American Empire. So for the Catholic Church to achieve its eschatology and establish, again, the city of God, what they need to do is also see the Anglo-American Empire destroyed, just like the Roman Empire, okay? So that is the Catholic eschatology. The last eschatology I want to discuss is the Orthodox eschatology. And what's the Orthodox eschatology? The Russians, okay? This is called the Third Rome prophecy, okay? The Third Rome prophecy is basically that Moscow will become the third Rome, okay? The first Rome was Rome, second Rome was Constantinople, the third Rome will be Moscow. And also what's really important to appreciate is that there will be no fourth Rome. So when Moscow becomes a third Rome, history ends, okay? And peace and prosperity will come to the world, okay? So what does this mean? It means that Russia will unite the Orthodox world, okay? So right now, the Orthodox world is split into Eastern Orthodoxy and Greek Orthodoxy, okay? And something that is very important that this prophecy says is that the Russians will defeat Turkey in a war, and then have the Greeks return to Constantinople, which is.
When he said Turkey, he's saying Turkey. He's just pronouncing it Turkey, but he's saying Turkey.
Modern day Istanbul. Okay, that's what the prophecy says. And so you look at all these different eschatologies, okay? And again, guys, this is the majority of the world, right? If you actually look at their convergence points, you come to some startling conclusions, okay? So let's look at the convergence, right? Where do they converge, okay? Well, first of all, okay, where they converge is that the greater Israel project will be achieved, okay? Pax Judaica will be achieved. It's the one world government, okay? One world government. That is one major convergence. If that's true, then another convergence is the Al-Aqsa Mosque will give way to the third temple. All these eschatologies either say this or are indifferent to saying this, okay? They're not opposed to this, all right? So that's why I predict the the Al-Aqsa Mosque will be destroyed because they need to build a third temple. Another thing in which they converge is the rise of anti-Semitism. Why? Because that will force the diaspora, the Jewish diaspora, to return to Israel. This is very important for this eschatology, okay? Another important convergence point is the war of Gog and Magog. We don't actually know what this is, but this war is supposed to be the final war before the return of God, before the end of history, before the end of the world, okay? What this war is, we don't know yet. But another thing is that this war in Iran will lead to the war of Gog and Magog at some point, okay? What this war is, we'll discuss at a later time. Another thing that's very important is US and China are not part of this eschatology, okay? This is where everyone agrees. For whatever reason, the United States is not going to partake in future events. Neither will China, which means that something will happen to these two countries that will make them not significant anymore, okay?
This part here is extremely not true.
Okay? And the best prediction for the United States then is civil war, right? Okay? Civil war, okay? And this is where all these eschatologies converge. So in other words, this war in Iran is happening so that these different eschatological traditions can achieve heaven on earth from their perspective, right? So what this means, so given this convergence, we can actually predict certain events that will happen over the next 2 to 4 years, okay? Because they all want these things to happen together, all right? So let's look at some quick predictions, okay? First prediction, of course, is that the US will use ground troops because using ground troops will create a national draft. And what does a national draft do? It creates a civil war, right? A lot of young people are going to refuse to fight in this war. And this is going to create protests. Then America will have no choice but to deploy the National Guard. And this will create the recipe for a lot of civil conflict in America, okay? Another thing that will happen is because you use ground troops, you will lose the war, and then CENTCOM, which is the American military in the Middle East, will then transfer over to Israel. What's happening in this war is that the economies of the GCC are being destroyed, and that's part of the plan, okay? Because for Israel to achieve the Greater Israel Project, it needs to absorb the GCC and parts of Turkey and parts of Egypt, okay? So another way of saying this is that the GCC is basically finished. The intention is to collapse their economies and make them irrelevant, right? The third thing we can expect is that Turkey will enter this war, and Saudi Arabia actually, will enter the war.
So Anoop made this clear last night about the oil, because that's the whole thing is the more oil or the blood of earth that they possess, it takes the light out. Once you take away the oil, all of these countries that are up in the modern day times will cease to function with those who had infrastructure built, which is plants, electric grids, and all that stuff. I think Cuba is in the dark right now because they all been cut off. Again, Anoop dropped a heavy jewel last night about that. And this is what the Bible talks about symbolically about not having your lamp run out of oil. And they said there's a parable where a bunch of virgins was traveling to meet the to meet the groom, and they was given some oil in their lamp, and someone didn't bring enough oil. And they told them that they was about to run out of oil, give them some of their oil. And the other brides were like, nah, you get your own oil. And so some of them ran back to get more oil while they was gone. They was standing outside of the groom's palace or whatever, and they came out and brought them in. When the other woman came back, the door was shut, so they was left out in the dark, and they missed their opportunity. So it's the same thing. They following this book, but it's a geopolitical thing. So that parable is showing that the brides who had oil are smaller countries who didn't have enough oil or power or geopolitical pull to wait it out until the groom came to the door and let them in. But it's just in reverse. You see, so a lot of these people is running out of oil because the groom, which is fitting for America and Israel, they groomers, like Epstein grooming. And they can't groom you through the way that Epstein was doing it. They're gonna take you out. They're gonna cut your power off, take your oil, and take advantage of you. And this is what's taking place. But what he's trying to say is the only way Israel can be the dominant power in the Middle East is that America has to fall by way of fighting inside, and her powers that's overseas, like he said, will have to transfer to Israel. Israel becomes the new America. America is over here stuck fighting itself with all these different people they done let in here over the years, and whatever traps and booby traps Israel done laid out with the CIA and the FBI, all these other groups that's working for Israel. America falls all the way off the map. And this is what he think might happen. And Israel can now maintain its power without worrying about America being a threat. So this is what he's saying, why he don't think America won't be involved. But China definitely gonna be in the game, which y'all gonna see as we get through this.
Because you want to use this war to weaken opposition to these eschatologies as much as possible. Okay? So Turkey and Saudi Arabia will enter this war, and they will suffer tremendously because of their participation. Again, the Al-Aqsa Mosque will be destroyed. Okay? And then you'll have the rise of Persia. Okay? The rise of Persia. Why is this important? Because you need the Islamic world to unite against Israel for the end of days, right? So you don't mind if actually Iran wins this war, because by winning this war, Iran will activate its Persian identity. And this is important for eschatology because in the war of Gog and Magog, people are interpreting Gog and Magog, which will march against Israel. They're interpreting Gog and Magog to be Persia and Russia. Together they will march against Pax Judaica. Number 6 is that in Israel, you will achieve the Pax Judaica and the Greater Israel Project. Okay? So the Greater Israel Project and Pax Judaica are not the same thing, guys. Greater Israel is just basically the territory that the Israelis believed that God had promised their ancestor Abraham. Pax Judaica is a one world government, okay, based on AI surveillance and the mark of the beast. So what will happen is that Israel will use this war to expand its territory, and then what will happen is that capital, technology, will then start to flow to Israel in order to create the Pax Judaica. So think of companies like NVIDIA, Oracle, Microsoft, Google. Well, they'll probably transfer themselves to Israel because that is where the power will rest. Okay? So Pax Judaica. Then you will have Russia winning the war in Ukraine, okay? And then return Greeks to Constantinople. Basically, another way of saying this is, it is possible that the Greeks go to war against Turkey, and then Russia supports the Greeks and return the Greeks to Istanbul, okay? But then you're like, wait a minute, Turkey is a NATO member. Well, we can also expect destruction of Europe, okay? The end of NATO, basically. So, this war in Ukraine, it's not just about Russia protecting its borders. This war in Ukraine is also meant to achieve Orthodox eschatology, to destroy Europe, to destroy NATO, so that Russia can achieve the Third Rome prophecy. That means the destruction of Europe. So I will discuss the Russian-Ukraine war later on as we go along, okay? But what I'm trying to show you is that just by, okay, analyzing the most extreme eschatologies of different religious traditions, you can then, from this analysis, pick out points in which they agree, okay? And at these points, you can figure out then how they will affect current geopolitics to make certain predictions about how the war will progress, about how the world will transform itself in the next 2 to 4 years, okay? So this is called the law of eschatological convergence. It gives us tremendous insight into why things are turning out the way they are, okay? Because again, I keep on saying this, but purely from a geopolitical perspective, purely from a realpolitik perspective, this war in Iran makes no sense. But if you look at it from an eschatological perspective, then it makes perfect sense, okay? Any questions?
All right, so that will be the first half of this particular class. Anybody got anything to say before I move on? We've been at it about 37 minutes, and that needed to be done for what I'm about to do next. Y'all good over there?
Yeah, maybe need more on mute. All right, but that's all. I'll go first.
All right, go ahead.
No, I was about to say I didn't think I'd see the day when there's an Asian soon-to-be Noonie Boo. I'm joking. The information was pretty good. I like the way he broke it down. You know, I'm jealous because I like blackboard type of, you know, education. I get more in tune when it's blackboard education. But no, he was pretty thorough in a lot of what he's putting together, and it seems that he studied world history to know exactly how these events are going to play out. Because to tell you the truth, a lot of these nations, the ones that run these nations, they follow the same manuscript over and over because they realize that these manuscripts they work. The way how nature causes power to be given from one side to the other is the same script over and over. The problem is when you under a spell, you don't see the script, you don't see the play that happens over and over, repeatedly, over and over. So that's what Ghost God and his descendants are actually doing. And the last thing he said, and before I finish, last thing he said about the companies going back and giving their power to Israel, that's exactly what the beast is doing. The beast is going to give his power to what you call it, to one central act. But they've been doing this, they've been using America to build themselves up. That's why a lot of these CEOs of these companies, these big Fortune 500 companies, they have Jewish lineage. So because they already know that eventually they're going to take their power and take it all the way back to Israel in order for them to achieve this one world government status that he's speaking about. So yeah, that's going to be a very interesting thing to see take place, because I think that eventually at some point in time, Trump is gonna see the swindle, and he's gonna try to back out of the swindle, but it is gonna be too late by then. So yeah, it was a nice breakdown and stuff like that from the professor. So that's pretty dope. But that's all I gotta say. True peace.
Yeah. Well, it has fallen people in such disarray of getting their mind. It's like it was a movie that came out in 1980 called The Fog. And it was a supernatural horror film directed by John Carpenter, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Adrian Barbeau, and Tom Atkins, about a ghostly globe that descends on a town, California coastal town, bringing with it the vengeful spirits of lepers a century prior. So that's basically what those spirit prior is, those gods that's controlling them now, based upon Osiris being the god of death and so forth. So they actually came out with a movie showing exactly what is being portrayed in front of our face. They got a ghost, the fog represent that has taken over the people, and which will soon be broken. True peace.
Okay. All right. Thank you for everybody putting in little 2 cents in. We've been at it 43 minutes. I'm trying to think, do I want to stop this and come back? Because it ain't that long. It depends on how much talking I do in between it. Because I think that's what I'm gonna do. What we're gonna do, we're gonna cut this one and just come right back, because it's a nice bit of reading. So we're gonna cut this one, y'all, and then we're gonna turn around and come right back for part 2. All right? True Mental Cosmic Peace.